Chinaza's life in her aunt's house had been nothing short of misery. After losing her parents at a young age of 8, she was taken by her father's sister, Miss Nkoli, who promised to care for her like one of her own. But that promise turned into a cruel lie. From a young age, Chinaza was treated as nothing more than a servant. She was forced to do all the housework, from cooking and cleaning to fetching water and tending to the goats. Her aunt's daughter, Adeze and Ujunwa, lived in luxury, doing no work and wearing fine colorful dresses, while Chinaza wore rags and often went hungry. Every night, Chinaza slept in the goat house as her auntie wouldn't allow her sleep in the main house. Inhaling the filthy air filled with the smell of manure and sickness. One of the goats had been ill for weeks, but her aunt refused to let Chinaza sleep anywhere else. Chinaza was given the worst task, and no matter how hard she worked, her aunt always found something to punish her for. Even worse, Adeze, her aunt's first daughter, who had recently been sent to the village in disgrace. Her husband had divorced her, unable to tolerate her laziness, bad character, and constant demand from her mother. Despite her beauty, Adeze's refusal to do any work or show respect to her husband had led to her return, much to her mother's happiness, as she believed the man was too poor for her daughter. One evening, Chinaza's life took a turn when Prince Ike, who had visited a neighboring village, fell into the river. It had rained cat and dog that day, and the river was flooded. The prince and his guards were crossing the river to the village when their boat capsized. Without hesitation, Chinaza, who had been fetching water under the rain, rushed to save him, and one of his guards, she dragged him to safety. The prince, grateful for her bravery, couldn't forget her face. He returned to the river days later in search of Chinaza. It wasn't hard to find her, as she was a constant visitor to the river. They got chatting and soon became best friends. It wasn't long before Prince Ike fell helplessly in love with Chinaza. Oftentimes he gifted her beautiful clothes and beads, but she rejected them because of her aunt. The prince, having witnessed her suffering, proceeded to seek her hand in marriage. He couldn't bear seeing her suffer and smiling. Whenever the prince tries to confront her aunt, Chinaza pleads with him, covering up for her. She either claims that her auntie is very poor, so can't afford a luxury life for her, or that she did something wrong and that's why she hit her. Though the prince knew she was lying, few weeks later, the prince announced to her aunt that he wanted Chinaza as his bride. The villagers who heard about it were shocked, but no one was more shocked than her aunt. Her aunt had always seen Chinaza as nothing but a slave, and the villagers saw Chinaza as a dirty girl, and the idea that a prince would want to marry her was unthinkable. She had hoped the prince would choose one of her own daughters, particularly Ujunwa, who was very beautiful, well polished, and jealousy burned in her aunt's heart, and she quickly devised a wicked plan to sabotage Chinaza. Late one night, her aunt set a trap. Knowing fully well that Chinaza sleeps in the goat house without light, she placed a cracked clay pot filled with water on Chinaza's path. Unknowingly, the girl stumbled over the pot, shattering it. The loud crash echoed through the compound, and her aunt rushed out, her face twisted with forced fury. "You useless girl!" her aunt screamed, grabbing Chinaza by the arm. "Do you know what you've done?" That was miracle water for the sick goat. Chinaza, trembling with fear, fell to her knees. "I'm sorry, auntie. It was an accident." Her aunt glared at her, seizing the moment to punish Chinaza even further. "Sorry won't fix this. You will go and fetch water from the Agbara Blue River. Only that water can heal this goat." Chinaza's heart froze. The Agbara Blue River was feared throughout the land. No one who had ventured there had ever returned alive. The journey alone would take 3 days through dangerous, uncharted land, and the river was said to be guided by fierce spirits. "Please, auntie," Chinaza begged, tears streaming down her face. "I will fetch water from anywhere else. Please don't send me there." But her aunt was unmoved. "It must be the Agbara water. You leave now or don't return at all." Left with no choice, Chinaza set out that night. As she walked away from the village, her heart heavy with dread, she came across two different rivers. Desperate to avoid the Agbara Blue River, she fetched water from each, hoping it would be enough. But when she returned home, her aunt cruelly rejected both of them. "This is not the water I asked for," her aunt snapped. "Go to the Agbara Blue River or face the consequences." Chinaza's pleas were ignored. Her aunt's heart was set on sending her to a place of no return. With no other option, Chinaza began the long and dangerous journey to the dreaded river. As she walked through the night, her tears fell, knowing that her own family had condemned her to impossible fate. Chinaza walked for hours in the dark, her feet aching and her eyes heavy with sleep. She had to rest under a large tree for a while, but knew she couldn't stop for too long. The journey was dangerous, and the stories she had heard about the Agbara Blue River made her tremble. She had no food, no protection, and no idea what lay ahead. The forest was filled with strange sound, and shadows danced under the moonlight. Despite her fear, Chinaza kept walking, determined to complete the task and return home, even without knowing where she was going to. On the second day of her journey, Chinaza reached the top of a hill and came face to face with a terrifying sight. Sitting on the hill was the first of the 7 gods, a creature with 2 heads and a tail of a fish. Chinaza was so frightened that she screamed and begged the god not to harm her. The gods, however, found her fear amusing and moved closer as if to attack. Chinaza remembered the stories she had heard. The gods only listened to songs. With her heart racing, she began to sing about her situation, hoping for mercy. Chinaza's voice trembled as she sang. "I mistakenly threw away my aunt's miracle water. I fetched the river's water, but she refused. I fetched the purest water, but she refused. She said it must be the Agbara water." Hearing her song, the 2-headed god stopped and listened carefully. It felt pity for the girl and allowed her to pass unharmed. Relieved but still frightened, Chinaza thanked the god and continued on her way. Not long after leaving the hill, Chinaza encountered another god. The one had 3 human heads and a long snake-like body. Chinaza was once again filled with fear, but she knew what she had to do. She began to sing her sorrowful song, explaining her journey and the cruel tax her aunt had given her. The three-headed gods listened to her song, and after hearing her story, it too felt pity for her. The god allowed Chinaza to pass, warning her that more challenges were ahead. As Chinaza continued her journey, she came across the third god, a creature with 4 heads and the tail of a serpent. Chinaza was terrified but knew that singing was her only chance of survival. She sang her song, hoping that the 4-headed god would also allow her mercy. The god listened and, moved by her word, allowed her to pass as others had. Chinaza thanked the god and pressed on, her body growing weak from hunger and exhaustion. After passing the 4-headed gods, Chinaza's path became more dangerous. She stumbled upon a massive fire-breathing dragon, its scale glowing with intense heat. The dragon blocked the road ahead, its eyes glaring down at her. Chinaza's heart pounded in her chest. How could she possibly survive this? But she knew she had to try. Once again she began to sing, her song shaky but determined. I'm on a journey of pain and sorrow. For my aunt's cruel order I must follow. I seek the water that heals her goats. Please let me go, my heart can't cope. The fire dragon listened closely, its flames flickering gently. Moved by her song, it decided not to harm her and stopped, allowing her to continue her journey. The fire dragon had been the most terrifying creature Chinaza had seen, but she had made it through. Her feet were blistered and her stomach groaned with hunger, but she was determined to reach the Agbara Blue River. The journey was taking a toll on her, and her body ached with every step. As she walked, she thought of her parents, the life she could have had if they were still alive. She wondered if anyone at home cared about her, or if her aunt had already spread lies about her disappearance.